Welcome to the Megacoliversery Parts 2 through 5. So this is going to be really interesting because I'm going to get us through all of this, and I know we've been behind on it, but I've decided to make up for the about 4 weeks by making about 4 parts in one, and we're going to look at the build, we're going to look at the cards from each set and kind of how they have their influence on Mega Colony in the original format. So, what? What? Hmm. Alright, so the second set... The second set for Mega Colony is VGB Tiro Zoo. Oh god, those aren't words. Onslaught of Dragon Souls. So it was released in 2012 and it introduces 4 new cards. There is no archetypal cards yet, although there aren't really any archetypes in Vanguard yet, but there are some interesting vague utility cards that we get access to here. The first is Mega Colony Battler A, so you have a 10,000 guard that you could use as an extra unit outside of your composite ride lines, and it will help you generate soul. It's not great. You don't need soul early, but it does play a part in a build you can run. Phantom Black, it's a Mega Colony vanilla. Unfortunately, there's no point in really running it outside of Bruiser common builds, with the method of playing more vanillas, higher power, just more consistently higher power, beat down. You know, beat down. Lady Bomb. So this is your grade 2 Paralyze unit, and this kind of easily replaces Hell Spider in the previous build. Basically, you place it, counterblast 2, Paralyze. It works really great with the Nova Grappler focus. So if you run Mr. Invincible and you run this, then it's just a great grade 2 option. I said that Lady Bomb replaced Hellspider, but that's not really true because Fraud gives you a general advantage skill, and that's certainly very interesting in general when you look at cards like these. Just threatens on hit, makes the opponent guard it, and in a terrible scenario, you can just ride it and it can get an extra boost from an 8k or some other unit to really hit for 21k, which not a lot of units can do at this point in time. Here's a deck list. So this is basically the same deck idea as the other Mr. Invincible Nova Grappler one. So this is a multi-clan build between Nova Grappler and Mega Colony that focuses a lot on countercharging with the Nova Grappler pieces and then using Paralyze to basically inhibit the back row from messing with you. It's not as great as Retire, but Retire is not a big thing in the game yet, so it's technically not terrible, even if it is expensive. Next is VGBT04, so we skipped a set before we got new Mega Colony support, and we actually get 16 new Mega Colony cards, so you can actually count this as a support wave for Mega Colony. You can now play pure Mega Colony and hopefully not suffer before the year 2012 is over. And most of it is rare or common rarity, so it's actually not that terrible to build, per se. Alright, so the first one is we got a Ride Line card, is Larva Mutant Giraffa. It's kind of difficult to play because it does not have the Forerunner skill, but it does give you plus, so this card can't be sniped, and it'll stay in the soul. But it can net you a +1 if you ride the exact same card. Or not the exact same card, but a Ride Line card. We have triggers now, so that's great. That's lovely, amazing. You know. So Raider Mantis, Sharpness Scorpio, Mythical Battle of Rempli, and Sonic Cicada. You just have the 4 generic triggers. It's great. Pupa. You ride this on top of Larva. You get a search for Elite, and you can actually search it by putting it on Brigard and pitching a grade 3, which is weird because you don't really think of the OG format as having cards like these. But it does actually help a lot in terms of consistency if you don't have the Ride Line available for later. The only difficulty with it is the low power of 6,000, but it does turn into an 8k vanilla when you ride it on top of Larva. Sentinel. It's Sentinel. Yeah, run it. Don't want to get hit. Gloom Flyman was a pretty interesting card because it paralyzes grade 0 cards when it's placed in the Guardian Circle. So it's actually a defensive tool for Megacoliversery back then, and it's definitely interesting. Because especially like Royal Paladin Rush, you don't really want to see those grade 0s getting a lot of optimization. So you can actually deny a lot of power and hits from just running this card. This is one of the first of the 6k Vanguard boosters. So basically, this is a generic card archetype for most clans. And usually, if you meet the conditions, like your opponent has less rear guards, or you have more rear guards, or they're all rest, then if it boosts the Vanguard, it'll become essentially a 10k boost. And that's kind of what Stealth Millipede goes for, is it's that 10k boost if all of your opponent's units are rest. Yeah. Hey, look, a cheap Paralyze unit. That's definitely great, except it's on hit, which is terrible. There's not really a lot else to say, but in a Paralyze build, you could run it. The only problem is that you need to boost a Megacoliversery unit, which means that it's a lot more difficult to optimize in a mixed Nova Grappler Megacoliversery build. But if you're running Lady Bomb, then you can just run that and focus a little more on the grade 1, grade 3 Nova Grappler units. And you can just focus from there. Elite is interesting. Like most other Redline units, it becomes the vanilla version, which is 10k if you ride on top of the exact card. But if it hits, it paralyzes a unit. So this is usually only ever going to be the grade 1 unit. I say grade 1 unit, the grade 0 unit, the Forerunner. It doesn't really net a lot of advantage, but it can stop a lot of rushing or punish a lot of rushing, which is odd, because it's free, but it's still on hit, so it's not necessarily great. The opponent can usually just let this go through, and it doesn't really hurt them in any way, shape, or form, since you need a lot of counterblast for all of your skills anyways. So you're probably going to let their Vanguard attack through the next turn anyways. Watergang is a lot like his V format counterpart. If his attack hits, you can counterblast to and draw a card. It's expensive, but it's also not a minus in terms of skill, so you can just run this, not in a Nova Grappler mix build, but in a pure Megacoliversery build, and kind of just take down the opponent with card advantage rather than with power. Teljo is another power card. If all of your opponent's units are res, it's an 11k when it attacks during your turn. Not when it attacks, it just has 3k power, which is interesting, but again, all of your opponent's units have to be rest, and it's a format where people are usually running stand triggers because they don't have They don't have, like, a critical, for example. So that's interesting, right? Iron Cutter Beetle. It's 12k on your turn if you have Giraffe as your Vanguard. This is kind of really strong because there's only a couple of cards in the OG format that do this. And having a grade 2 unit that can just hit Vanguards consistently, like it doesn't even require a gimmick, like Tail Joe, makes it just a very, very optimal card to run in this build. And I'm pretty sure it's a common, so as long as you pulled the Giraffe G3, then you're basically golden for this. And speaking of golden, the Golden General himself, it's the third in the right line, and with a fucking god-awful skill. Jeez. I'm pretty sure this is the same set that Amber Dragon comes out in, so why this skill works like this, I actually have no clue. Because you have to retire 2 Mega Colony units and counterblast 2 to retire 2 grade 1 or less units. I guess this kind of falls in line with the fact that Paralyze kind of has to target the back row. But at the same time, if you're targeting the back row, then you are definitely not paralyzing them. And on top of that, I don't know, it's a terrible card. Makes you go minus. There is another card they introduced in the set that kind of works and provides for Giraffe, but it's kind of still not great. Violent Vesper is a generic grade 3 archetype that they introduce in a couple of clans. Some examples are Shadow Paladin and Royal Paladin. I'm pretty sure they also introduced one in Spike Brothers. I don't believe every clan got it, but basically you call it, you flip the top card of your deck. If it's a Mega Colony, call it the rear guard. At this point, you're basically playing a full Mega Colony deck. So you can generate numbers for Giraffe skill or get a free column to attack your opponent. It's a great advantage card, and it has 9k power and it can't intercept, which is a weakness, but you can definitely use it with Giraffe skill to kind of pressure the opponent with on-hit skills. It can be detrimental, especially if you have to ride it, but at least the skill isn't only rearguard, so if you are forced to ride it, then you can at least get a superior call. Then finally is the last card. People are terrified of this in the premium format, but I doubt anyone remembers what the original does. Mega Blast. All of your opponent's rearguards can't stand. And that sounds really good, right? It's Mega Blast. And it's only rearguards. That's great. Okay. So why doesn't it work like Invincible? Instead of having a skill that countercharges and falls more in line with the generic Paralyze skills, it gives you a skill that boosts your power, which is kind of extremely detrimental considering everything in Mega Colony at this point is so expensive outside of Tail Joe and Gloom Flyman. So unless you're playing a vanilla beatdown deck, it's pretty much impossible to play Antlion, and the Mega Blast is hard to use. You could use this in a build with Master Fraud and get the soul and threaten your opponent, kind of, but you would still have a limited amount of Counterblast, and then you wouldn't have the ability to Mega Blast. Here's the build. It's Giraffe. You basically run all the Giraffe units, you run all of the triggers, you actually run the Stealth Millipede and Paralyze Madonna because you want the power from Stealth Millipede. You want to be able to threaten that on hit with your Giraffe. You basically only run power in your grade 2 units because you don't have the extra cards to really be able to threaten your opponent. So you run 4 Elite Mutant, 4 Iron Cutter, 3 Teljo, and then you run 2 Water Gang because having additional threat for on hit can make the opponent mess up in Judgment and perhaps take some extra damage. Then we just run Violent Vesper for the field advantage. Even if you call a trigger, like it could be really useful or pressuring a rear guard or something else. Finally, we're on to the extra booster set, so that's Comic Style Volume 1. I'm pretty sure there's not a Comic Style Volume 2, even though I know there's another Mega set, so I'm not quite sure why it's worded like that. So we get 5 Mega Quality cards in this set, and we get access to the Marketing archetype. Finally, Marketing? Marketing. Not great, but there's some options in here. Shelter Beetle, I love this crit. It looks great, and now you can play 8 crit of Mega Colony. It's great. Worker Ant. So if you didn't like the idea of playing an optional on ride that sometimes that's to advantage, you can play Worker Ant and you can work it with Stag Beetle's skill. You can also play it as an extra grade 0 in the marketing build. Even though the marketing build at this point isn't necessarily great, you get to stand a rear guard when it's placed. Marketing Hornet, if there's a marketing in the soul, it gets 3k, so it can be a 10k rear. It doesn't attack over a lot, but it can be useful for early rushing if you have a lot of marketings in the soul, or, you know, you start with Worker Ant in the soul. Mantis, same thing. It's a reprint of Hornet as a grade 2. If you pair Hornet and Mantis together, you can actually get a 22 power column, which is kind of crazy, but it's also only for the turn that they're placed. And with the gimmick of marketing and how it's utilized here, it's kind of difficult to get off the ground. Stag Beetle. So when it's placed on Vanguard, you call 2 Mega Colony cards from your soul that are marketings as rest. But Stag Beetle gets their power. And I'm not sure if... Yeah, because it's their original power, so you can't call Hornet and Mantis and get their increased power. Which still doesn't matter, because you still get 26,000 power. But you could call Mantis and Worker Ant instead. And with Mantis, you can reset... Not Mantis. With Worker Ant, you can reset Mantis and get another unit that attacks. It's kind of difficult because you're calling units as rest, right? But it's also free, and that kind of leads into the build strategy idea that this has. So we have a starter unit as the Marketing Worker Ant, and we basically play an extra one in the main deck, just because like it's useful for restanding for his technical skill. We're going to be playing 8 crit for draw 4 heal, you know how that goes. So we're going to play the Mega Colony Battler B, actually, Marketing Hornet, and the Paralyzed Madonna, because, you know, Sentinels. We also have the extra skill use, because the Marketings don't actually have any cost. Next you have the Marketing Mantis and the Tail Joe for power pressure, but more importantly is the Water Gang. The Water Gang threatening on hit and in general just giving you ways to pressure your opponent is really good. Then we just have Stag Beetle and Vesper. Vesper is actually a very terrible card to play with this deck because you want a superior call multiple times with Stag Beetle's skill. Maybe get some extra intercepts in there or something, I don't know. But maybe it could call you boosters, or it could be useful as a pitch fodder for Madonna. You don't want to play Fraud, and you don't want to play Antlion. You could play Antlions in here to kind of feed into Stag Beetle's skill, which, now that I think about it, might not be so bad, so it's definitely something you could switch in and out. So we're not going to get to another mainline set for a while, so we're going to be going to Extra Booster Set 3, Cavalry of Black Steel. So now we're in 2012, more Mega Colony support, Limit Break, and we get 10 Mega Colony cards. Mega Colony Battler C. So we finally get the Forerunner that can be used in any Mega Colony board, and it doesn't matter. And you can basically just counterblock. It's Mega Colony Battler B, but it goes into Soul. It's on hit, but it's on hit. And it goes into the Soul, so you can't really get it retired with a Kagero backline sniper or Murakumo or whatever people play at this point, honestly. Could be useful, could just feed into your soul. It's a great generic card if you want to get into the game. Dragonfly, you could play 8 stands now. Pest Professor Badfly is a generic pitch draw card on hit, which is so unbelievably confusing considering its low power and its lack of advantage, but it can have its uses. Mosquito. This is basically critical for the marketing strategy. You have a soul charge on place, so you could write this on Vanguard and not only set up for your Stag Beetle turn, but you could also maybe get some other cards of the soul that can be called later with Stag Beetle. Just great in general for the marketing strategy, even though we don't have marketing triggers yet, which is kind of concerning, which means you can't call them from soul, but whatever. Toxic Soldier. It's terrible. So, to fix the problem with Paralyze, they decided to implement an archetype of Megacoliversery unit called Toxic. And the Toxic archetype, decidedly when they attack, opponents' units can't intercept. So, the idea is that you paralyze their front row, and then attack with these units, and they can't intercept, right? Wrong! They only can't intercept for that battle. And I want to reiterate that this is almost a full year after Sealed Dragon Blockade was released, a Vanguard that stops intercepting in general. It's terrible. I suppose it would be weird to just completely reprint Sealed Dragon Blockade in Megacoliversery, but it probably would have helped a lot. And I'm pretty sure there was actually a point in Vanguard 0. There was a card. Or, no, it wasn't a card, but they re-amped Megacoliversery so that Paralyze stopped intercepting. So that's... you couldn't just intercept with them and then call it a unit. And it basically just had net value. Transmutated Thief Steel Spider. So if you have 4 or more Megacoliversery units, if you wanted to play a Vesper-focused build, this would be the card for that build. You would basically play Vanillas and Steel Spider, or maybe not Vanillas, but it's definitely a card that can let you hand advantage for free if your opponent's not paying attention, or it could just force them to guard so that you really just don't have to deal with their stuff. I realize I said that you could play it with a vanilla, but unless your opponent's playing a 10k Vanguard, which it's a limit break arrow, so they're probably not. But it's definitely something to consider. Roly Poly. It's Bug S Special Intercept. So basically, what its Special Intercept is basically if you have a Vanguard of the same clan as this card that intercepts, it gets an extra 5k power. And usually they have 8k power, so it's not a terrible card, considering it's not a paralyzed unit that costs 2 CB, so you know that. Toxic Trooper. It does exactly what Toxic Soldier does, but it's a grade 2. By the way, I mean exactly what Toxic Soldier does. Both of them have to be on attack. They cannot be on boost. Which means you have to have a grade 1 in the front row in order to land this hit. And this isn't Gold Paladin, by the way. This isn't like you're buffing these units. This is a grade 1 bug with no chance to gain any more power. Oh god, this archetype is terrible. You could play them, but it's not advised. Bewitching Officer Lady Butterfly. I'm pretty sure there's a grade 1 just called Deputy in V Premium. Don't play this card. This is a grade 3 filler card for some reason. Which is a shame because it looks like they spent a little bit of effort on the actual card art. I don't know why they do this. Honestly. Then there's a card in the set that everyone remembers, Martial Arts Mutant Master Beetle. This is the limit break card for Mega Colony, and it's a Draconic Overlord skill. Not on hit, which is huge. Paralyze 2 rear guards. So this is a great card to play as a main Vanguard or to play as an off Vanguard, because if your primary strategy fails, you can always just ride Master Beetle and then paralyze 2 units and kind of choke out your opponent's turn. I'm not sure if this is necessarily a great card, because I can't remember what decks were being played around the time of Cavalry Blacksteel. Just to give some idea, probably Kaiser Vermilion, Majesty Bloodblaster. So perhaps not a lot of cards would be shifting on and off of the field. So I'm certain that Master Beetle would definitely be able to net some advantage, especially against Aquaforce players. Aquaforce players not being able to restand or switch their front row and back row would definitely have a huge impact on their playstyle. At this point, they started introducing the Lord skill, which granted units like this, like Draconic Overlord had the skill as well, where if you had a non-violent Mega Colony or non-Kagero Vanguard, it gets 2k power and 2k less power on rear guard. But that's so terrible, and I'm not sure why they did this, because that means you can't play this in the Nova Cobbler version of the build and just reset your counter charge. Granted, your Vanguard is the only one with a limit break skill anyways. I'm pretty sure there's no rear guard with a limit break skill. I need to word that better. There's no rear guard limit break skill, so it triggers on rear guard. Gosh dang it, my computer's making so much noise today. But yeah. Here's the deck idea. So we're going to be working on the Machinating strategy. This one basically just adds Mosquito instead of Mega Colony Battler B. We have the Roly Poly, and this time we're playing... we're not playing any Water Gang, we're just playing the Iron Fist Mutant. Then we're running the Master Beetle as the off Vanguard. So it's not only just an 11k Vanguard we can sit on, but we can also choke the game a little bit better once we've built board. So if it gets retired or something, then we can play another Stag Beetle and maybe fill our numbers a little. It's not meant to be overly complicated, and you could definitely still stay on Water Gang instead of Iron Fist. It's just something that I was kind of going for. But yeah, that was just everything I wanted to talk about. That was 4 sets for the Mega Colony anniversary. Like, there's been so many sets, and it's really interesting watching them bounce between retire and superior calling, and it's just really, really interesting, the mindset for these different archetypes, so to speak. And it's kind of ruined a little when space is made up by cards like this, when there's amazing cards like this and this, and it's just, it makes me wonder what Mega Colony would have been like if it was kind of given a lot of love and consideration for its impact on the game. Because one thing you have to consider is that Paralyze is worse than Retire. So when you make a series of cards that Paralyze instead of Retire for the same cost, you're essentially making a worse deck. Because your opponent now has the decision to either intercept with those cards or easily replace them. There are even decks that totally replace them on the rear guard, and it will be a long time before they fix a lot of the weaknesses of the deck. But there are also apparent weaknesses that cripple the deck. But that's all I wanted to say. I hope everyone has a nice day and just enjoys their time.